A few years ago in early August, I was the chief engineer for a design-build construction firm, frequently traveling out of town for work. This week was no different. My flight from Hartsfield-Jackson was scheduled for 7:21 a.m. the next day, which meant a 4 a.m. wake-up to beat Atlanta traffic. So I left work early on Monday to get home and prepare. As expected, my work in Baton Rouge turned problematic, and I spent Tuesday afternoon, evening, and half of Wednesday fixing issues. Our on-site project manager, Etherly, hopefully learned from this experience, but I'll keep a closer eye on him moving forward. By Wednesday afternoon, I was driving on I-10 to meet coworkers in New Orleans. Mary Jo Pilecki, a construction manager I had trained in Atlanta, was going on maternity leave soon. As her friend, I monitored her project closely to ensure everything was documented for her successor. Unsurprisingly, Mary Jo had everything under control. After dinner with Mary Jo and her husband Ozzy on Wednesday night, we had a planning meeting Thursday morning. Then I caught a flight from Louis Armstrong Airport and navigated through Atlanta traffic to reach my office by 1:45 p.m. I reported to my boss, Mr. Strickland, about the Baton Rouge project, recommending tighter supervision, and updated him on Mary Jo's progress in New Orleans. He agreed with my suggestions and told me to take the rest of the day off after submitting my expense report. I quickly finished my expense report and was about to text Reagan that I'd be home early when Ethan Gardner, my best friend since third grade and coworker for 6 years, walked into my office and shut the door. "Hey, Trent, how was your trip?" "Long, but productive. Etherly should manage Baton Rouge better now, but I'm exhausted. Mr. Strickland told me to take the day off, so I'm heading out." Ethan's face darkened and I laughed, clarifying, "No, I'm not fired. Mr. S. just gave me the day off to compensate for the extra hours I spent cleaning up the mess in Baton Rouge. I'm planning to get flowers and wine and be in a good mood when Reagan gets home. Anything work-related can wait." Ethan interrupted. "Trent, this isn't about work. It's about Reagan." "What's wrong with Reagan?" Fear struck me. Why hadn't anyone contacted me if something happened? Ethan stammered, "Trent, she's been unfaithful while you've been traveling." Anger flared as I looked at Ethan, my lifelong friend. Reagan had admitted to being a free spirit in college, but she had promised to settle down when we got serious, seeing a therapist to help her transition. I trusted her. "Ethan, that's not funny. If you're joking, get out and think about our friendship before coming back." Ethan looked pained. "I'm serious, Trent. Jake Campbell heard from Clay that Reagan had been unfaithful. Clay's friend was involved with her, and he found out she wasn't exclusive. That's why he didn't keep it a secret." My world shattered as Ethan spoke, confirming my worst fears about Reagan. I knew it wasn't true, and I was furious with Ethan for believing such a stupid joke. I knew my wife better than anyone, and my anger turned to those spreading the lie and the idiot who started it. I was also angry with Ethan, my best friend, for helping spread this nonsense. "Ethan, it's not true, not one word. If you ever repeat this, I'll punch the hell out of you. Now get out before I decide to do it anyway." Ethan, 6 feet tall and about 150 pounds, had always been a skinny, nerdy kid. He knew I could follow through on my threat. He looked down, shook his head, and then looked up with pain in his eyes. "Trent, I'm sorry. We've been best friends for a long time, and I don't want to hurt you. But if I didn't tell you, you'd end up hurting more. You know that. You have a temper, and I've calmed you down many times in high school to keep you out of trouble. I wouldn't tell you this if I didn't think it was true. Here's the name of an investigator my cousin hired when he thought his wife was cheating. If she finds Reagan did something wrong, know it's the truth." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Ethan was right. We've been best friends since his family moved next door when we were kids. He was the poised nerd who kept us out of trouble, and I was the flashy athlete who pulled us out of messes. We went to different colleges, but I recommended him for a job at my firm, and we've worked together for 6 years. While I didn't believe Ethan's story, I realized he must have believed it and was trying to protect me. Exhaling slowly, I asked, "Your cousin's wife, was she—" "Oh yes, Miss Hightower investigated her," Ethan grimaced. "He divorced her, but still sees her twice a week for the kids. He loves his kids and would do anything to protect them. Without them, he'd probably have destroyed her and ended up on death row." "I'm sorry, man." Ethan answered his phone and left my office, closing the door behind him. I was left alone to mull over his accusations and what he'd said about his cousin. I felt sorry for the guy and mostly for the kids. Reagan and I were discussing expanding our family, hoping for a boy and a girl. I tried to calm down before packing up and heading home. I drove, trying to forget what Ethan said, but the seed he planted festered as I pulled onto the highway. No, I didn't believe it, not for a second. In fact, I refused to believe it. The whole thing seemed ridiculous, but it was serious. As I drove north on I-75, I considered telling Reagan about it, but decided against it. There was no need to make her angry over such lies, even if they came from Ethan. After a quick stop at the grocery store, I walked into the kitchen, and Reagan threw herself into my arms. "You're home early," she said before our lips met, making up for lost time since Tuesday morning. She added, "I worked late the last 2 nights so I could leave early today to greet you." "God, I missed you so much, Trent." I smirked, thinking about how beautiful and funny she was, dismissing the nonsense Ethan's friend had spread. I knew Reagan loved me and would never cheat. Ethan's story was out of my mind as Reagan fell asleep, content. I tried to read, but my thoughts were consumed by what Ethan had said. I knew the accusations were false and had to prove it to Ethan to save our friendship. Driving to work on Friday, I decided to contact the private investigator Ethan mentioned, not to prove Reagan cheated, but to prove she hadn't. I called Donna Hightower's office and scheduled an appointment for Monday afternoon. Arriving early, I walked into the office at 10 minutes to 2. Before marrying Reagan, I had kept a large investment account in my name, allowing me to hire an investigator without her knowing. At 2 o'clock, I was escorted to a conference room where a tall, attractive black woman in black slacks, a white blouse, and a red scarf greeted me. "Good afternoon, Mr. Rowe. I'm Donna Hightower. How can we help you?" Her firm grip and scrutinizing eyes suggested she was sharp and experienced. "Hello, Miss Hightower. I appreciate you meeting with me on short notice. My problem is simple. I travel frequently, and someone has spread a rumor about my wife cheating. I want you to prove it's not true." She began asking questions, and I told her everything I knew about the allegation and Reagan. Her questions were insightful, and she took notes, particularly about Reagan's carnal history before and during our relationship. I felt devastated when she set aside her pen and said, "Thank you for that information, Mr. Rowe. According to your client information sheet, you have a bachelor's and master's degree in engineering from Georgia Tech. How familiar are you with the philosophy of our legal system, particularly the burden of proof?" I hadn't expected that. I took an introductory philosophy course in undergrad and have been a witness in a couple of court cases at my firm, but I'm not well versed in the details, she nodded. "You asked me to prove your wife was not having an affair. That's proving a negative, which is difficult. For instance, you can prove a wine glass wasn't broken by showing it's intact. But proving a person didn't do something is harder. I can prove I didn't rob a bank yesterday with an alibi, but proving I didn't do something last week, year, or 10 years ago is nearly impossible without consistent records. In your case, we can observe your wife for a period and determine if she's having an affair during that time. But we can't prove she didn't have an affair before our observation began." "So proving a negative doesn't work here," I muttered, realizing she was right. "Perhaps, but if we watch her and find nothing, we can infer her actions. We might uncover past behaviors if they exist. However, we can never definitively say she never had an affair. If this works for you, Mr. Rowe, we'd be happy to take your case. If not, good luck finding someone who can meet your request." Understanding her point, I hired Hightower's private investigation service. I then spent a couple more hours with one of her investigators, answering questions, filling out a bio, and planning for the appropriate circumstances she mentioned. I had been working in the Atlanta office all week. On Saturday night, after Reagan went to bed, the circuit breaker in the basement tripped. I didn't notice until Sunday afternoon when the house felt hotter after we returned from church and lunch with some new members. Reagan complained, and I said I'd check the circuit breaker. I flipped a few switches, turned it off and on again, but nothing changed. "I'll call the HVAC service," I said. "Please do. It's too hot to sleep in there tonight," Reagan insisted. I called our HVAC company, but hung up after 2 minutes in their automated system. Then I called the number Donna Hightower had given me. "Hello, this is Trent Rowe. Our AC is out. Can you send someone over? Tomorrow at 10? "Perfect. Thanks." Reagan overheard. "It's too hot upstairs, so we'll sleep in the guest room tonight. It'll be like a hotel stay," she smirked. Her suggestion made me feel better than I had since Ethan told me the ridiculous accusation. There was no way Reagan could love me so much and do what she was accused of. Monday morning, Reagan made me strip the bed and throw the sheets in the wash. I worked from home and met with the HVAC guy, a subcontractor for Hightower's private investigative service. At 10 o'clock, he arrived and began working while I turned on the light switch. An hour later, he finished. These are motion-activated cameras staying on for 5 minutes after motion stops. They have wide-angle lenses capturing anything in sight discreetly. They're good enough for legal purposes, but not for movies. 3 in your bedroom, 1 in each room, and 1 on the bathroom door. They'll capture everything. I paid him for installation and 2 weeks' rent, thanked him, and went to work. When I got home, the house was chilly. Babe, I have to add a hotel job in Orlando to this week's trip. I was supposed to be in Tampa Tuesday night, but now I'll visit Orlando too. Loretta arranged a late Friday flight from Orlando. I'll try to get an earlier one, but it's unlikely. I'm really sorry. I'll miss you, Reagan said. But let's try to catch up a bit. She smirked, took my hand, and led me to the family room couch. I love you, Trent. I love you too, Reagan, I replied, meaning it. I smiled, knowing there was nothing wrong with our marriage, despite some idiot's baseless accusation. The meetings in Tampa went well, and the follow-up in Orlando was easy. I usually handled these remotely, but being on site kept our management team focused. I spent some time observing construction quality and pointing out issues to the assistant project manager. He was young, but promising, and I noted he'd soon be ready for more responsibility. I could have left Thursday afternoon, but chose not to. Reagan wasn't expecting me until Friday night, and I wanted to give Miss Hightower every possible minute to monitor Reagan, but I was confident she wouldn't cheat on me. I worked in my hotel room until noon, and in the evening I visited one of Orlando's famous weapon ranges. I rented a couple of pistols and let the tourists enjoy the machine weapons. On Friday, I worked at our construction site until it was time to head to the airport. The traffic on I-285 and I-75 was heavy, but I finally reached our exit. I was thrilled to walk into the house and have Reagan throw herself into my arms. Seeing my stress, she brought me a beer, and we snuggled on the couch before heading upstairs. On Saturday, Reagan went to the gym, and I took care of the yard. After getting a drink and watching the Braves game, I checked my personal email. There was nothing from the investigator. I checked again on Sunday while Reagan was out running errands. This time there was a message. Nervously, I opened it muttering, "Please, Lord, let this just be an update. Dear Mr. Rowe, your order will be ready on Monday at 11 a.m. Please contact our office to arrange delivery. Larson Toolworks." Relieved, I deleted the message. Reagan noticed I didn't look well when she got home, and I avoided her kisses. "Yeah, I don't feel so good," I said. "I don't want you to get sick. Let me hug you, and then you lie down while I make dinner." She hugged me, and I worried, only stroking her back and resting my head against her. I smelled flowers, not her usual scent. I didn't eat Sunday night and got up early Monday. The scent in her hair was different, making me question things. I tried to dismiss it as a perfume sample. After confirming the appointment on Monday morning, I arrived at Miss Hightower's office just before 11 a.m. She greeted me and waved me to a chair. "Mr. Rowe, we've concluded our investigation ahead of schedule, and I'm afraid I have bad news." She slid a file toward me. My world crumbled as I skipped to the photos. There she was with a man in our bedroom. Another photo showed the same scene. "Wait, the guy in this picture doesn't look like the one in the first," I exclaimed. "Sorry, it's all in the report. We documented her with 3 different men in 4 encounters from Saturday to yesterday afternoon. We repeated the second encounter, this time at a private home." "What?" I was stunned. "She went shopping yesterday." Her look was serious, and she nodded. "Mr. Rowe, Mrs. Rowe shopped Saturday afternoon, after her second meeting with lover number 2, and on Sunday, she only went to the grocery store. You could check receipts or credit card statements if she didn't use cash." "But she was going to the gym on Saturday," I whispered, still in disbelief. Miss Hightower shook her head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rowe. From the picture of her leaving the hotel with lover number 2, she wasn't at a real gym." "How can that be?" I demanded, anger overcoming disbelief. 3 different guys in 1 week, and I was taking care of her before and after." Miss Hightower raised a hand. "I'm not a psychiatrist, Mr. Rowe, just a good investigator. Your wife might have hyper-physical engaging disorder, often called nymphomania. She's gone to great lengths to hide her actions from you." "Flowers," I sighed. "The scent in her hair. She showered after seeing him yesterday." "Maybe, but she might have just washed her hair or sprayed it with something. She's meticulous about her appearance and even changes sheets between lovers. More than one spouse has been caught by a stain or scent." "But in our bed," I began, recalling she had even changed the guest bed sheets recently. "Yes, 2 of the 3 nights you were gone, she was with someone in your bedroom. Don't call them lovers. They're cheating, adulterous idiots." She nodded. "At least one, yes. We don't know the first one's name, and the third isn't married, but the second seems to be her regular, lover. He's married, making him an adulterer too. We identified him as Noah Wooliver, 32, your wife's boss at her firm. Idiot, I sighed, finding his picture in the folder, my fists clenching. I was about to get to that. Noah Wooliver became your wife's manager a few months ago. It's a large firm with multiple offices, so he might be in a parallel department. I shook my head. Mrs. Allenby was promoted in late spring, and Mr. Wooliver became her manager. Reagan never mentioned his name and said he wasn't social, but she pointed him out to me once when I picked her up from work. Miss Hightower shook her head in disbelief. Not social with the spouses of his mistresses, no doubt. Mr. Wooliver has no priors or outstanding warrants, but several unpaid parking tickets. Your wife met him at a bar Wednesday night, drove him to your house for over an hour, then drove him back. We got his name from DMV records and confirmed it through a web search. What a fool, I sighed, trying to control my anger. Miss Hightower continued. Calm down, Mr. Rowe. We're not done yet. She met with him at the hotel on Saturday and again yesterday at his residence. According to tax records, his residence is Mrs. Wooliver's. If she had arrived a few minutes earlier, or your wife had left a few minutes later, it could have been a close call. 2, I hissed. Her game is over, but she doesn't know it. I used to chase after any woman who showed interest, I admitted. It wasn't getting me anywhere until I met Reagan. She was the same in college, but wanted to settle down with me. She said she loved me, but now... Miss Hightower patted my arm. I glanced at Noah Wooliver's picture, anger boiling inside me. Miss Hightower gripped my arm firmly. Mr. Rowe, I'm sorry for what you're going through. Don't let your pain make you do something you'll regret. Seeking revenge can ruin your life. You could end up in jail, lose your job, and everything you've worked for. Remember, it's her mistake, not yours. She made me nod before continuing. Be careful. Don't let her actions destroy your future. Stay in control of your emotions. Don't go too far. My thoughts swirled. Betrayal confirmed, plans for children dashed, a desire for revenge. I knew I'd never physically injure her, but I intended to make her suffer emotionally. I'll be careful, but she'll feel every bit of the pain she caused me. Miss Hightower sighed, but made a final plea. Please be careful, Mr. Rowe. Don't go too far. It's easier than you think to cross the line. Miss Hightower recommended George C. Godwin as a divorce attorney. I spent 2 hours in Piedmont Park contemplating my next steps, then met with him. Mr. Godwin was an elderly black man, Miss Hightower's younger uncle. He was short, burly, and jovial, unlike his regal and reserved niece. He knew family law and the Georgia legal system inside out. We called each other by our first names and chatted before discussing my divorce. When I showed him the photos, he whistled. That answers that. What do we need? I handed him the flash drive with all the records Miss Hightower suggested. He reviewed it and praised his niece's thoroughness. This girl really knows her stuff, Trent. Everything looks ready. I'll put it together and let you know when we're ready to file. You can finish by next Monday? Yes, but it will cost you overtime. Do it, please. I then shared my plan and an additional request. His face remained expressionless. Be careful, Trent. You're right to be angry, but in legal proceedings you must be cautious. Looks and attitude matter in court. I forced a smile, knowing there's no big river in downtown Atlanta. I got home late Monday, claiming fatigue from a minor ailment. I avoided Reagan, pretending to be sick. I showered and brushed my teeth, trying to clear my mind. Tuesday morning, I left early without waking her to catch my flight to Charlotte. Thursday night, I made a dreaded call. Ethan, it's Trent. I need to apologize. You were right, and I was wrong. She played me. Ethan, like a brother, immediately forgave me and asked how he could help. I stayed home late Friday, pretending to be tired. Saturday morning, I went to my parents' house to help my dad with a project. I wanted to tell him, but knew I had to wait. I called Reagan late Saturday to say I wouldn't be home until Sunday afternoon. She sounded like she wasn't home and wasn't alone. I ended the call with a fake, love you. Sunday afternoon, while Reagan was likely out with someone, Mr. Godwin texted me. I called him, and he confirmed everything was ready. The bailiff would serve the papers Monday at 11 a.m. per my request. I excused myself from work, leaving Reagan a note saying I had business to attend to. I went to the office to finalize my plans. Reagan called twice, and I told her the case was dragging on, and I'd be home even later. I promised to leave early Monday and spend the evening with her. She cheered up and professed her love. I lied, but given her deceit, I thought, reincarnation is tough. She hissed when I got into bed that night, the last time I'd be there. After she left for work, I went through the house, marking everything I owned with bright painter's tape. Community property would be part of the settlement or donated. At 7:45, Ethan arrived, followed by the moving crew. I helped them start, then Ethan took over while I packed what I needed. Everything in the truck went to the warehouse. Reagan didn't notice I'd moved my weapons to my parents' house on Saturday. Almost done, and about to leave, Amy, Reagan's neighbor and friend, saw the truck and asked if we were moving. I managed to intercept her before she saw anything. "Shh," I said with a smirk. "I'm surprising Reagan with new furniture for our upcoming anniversary. 5 years next week. I'm clearing out old furniture and clutter before it arrives tonight. Please don't mention it to her until she tells you." She agreed, smiling, and left. By noon, the news would likely spread, so I was glad it was already almost 11. I tipped the movers generously, shook Ethan's hand, thanked him, and headed to the bank. At 9 a.m., I withdrew half the money from our accounts as a cashier's check. Then I deposited it into a new account at a credit union. At 10:45 a.m., I pulled into an office building parking lot in Sandy Springs and opened my laptop. I had applied for a new credit card in my name, so I closed the current card with a zero balance. This took longer than expected, and I started sweating from the time crunch. By 10:57 a.m., it was done, and I logged into our family email account, waiting for the planned text message. At 11 a.m., the process server texted me that Reagan was on her way. Another text followed. She was in the lobby, almost shaking with nerves. I uploaded the pre-written email to our family account. Despite wanting to send a more detailed message from Reagan's work email, I heeded the warnings from Miss Hightower and her uncle about going too far. The email to friends and family explained that I had filed for divorce, including 3 photos of Reagan and Noah. The photos were cropped and blurred to avoid explicit details, but were clear enough to show the affair. The message was not sent to Reagan or Noah. I hit send, ensured it was delivered, and logged out. My phone rang at 11:03 a.m. It was Reagan. "Trent, what the hell is this, a divorce?" "Why? I thought we were happy. Did you find someone else?" I laughed at her hysteria. "You thought we were happy? I did too, until I found out what you were doing. Look on the back of the envelope my lawyer included in the package." I heard her swearing and yelling, promising love as she had during our wedding 5 years ago. "Crap," she yelled. "Trent, it's not what it looks like. Let me explain." "No, Reagan, we're done. My attorney's contact information is in the packet. Contact him if you need anything." I hung up as she continued yelling. She called back, but I sent it to voicemail. Her messages were full of denials and lies, which I deleted without listening. I blocked her number. Immediately afterward, I called my father-in-law. Bob and Chessie were friends as well as in-laws, so I didn't bother sending them a message. "Hi, Bob, this is Trent. I hate to call you at work, but this is urgent, and you need to hear it firsthand. The situation just blew up." I heard him gulp. "What's going on, son?" "Bob, I'm sorry to say this, but due to Reagan's inability to honor our marriage vows, I'm ending our marriage." "Trent, no. I know my daughter's past, but things have changed. You can't hold that against her." "Bob, I wouldn't do that, but she's relapsed and it's serious. Just 2 weeks ago, while I was out of town, she went off the rails. I have locations, dates, times, pictures, and videos. It's been eliminating me. I hate telling you this over the phone, but you need to know I'm not doing this by choice. I can't trust her anymore. The papers were filed this morning and she's already received them." "No, I can't believe it. She promised me she was past this." "She promised all of us, Bob. But her promises weren't enough. If she had stayed true, I would have loved her forever. But now it's too late. The love I had for her is gone. I still care for you and your wife, which is why I'm telling you directly." Bob expressed deep regret for his daughter's actions. We said goodbye with regret in his voice. I then called Chessie, but it went to voicemail. Knowing Bob had likely called her, I left a short message. It was now 11:16 a.m., and I proceeded with the part of my plan I had doubts about. If I did this, I might hurt a stranger who didn't deserve it. But if I didn't, I could get hurt more. I put on sunglasses, a baseball cap, and a lanyard with a fake delivery company ID. Ethan knew to answer calls between 11 and 11:30 a.m. as Sunshine Process Serving. I chewed gum and walked into the building. At the security desk, I said, "Hi, TC Rowe from Sunshine Couriers and Process Serving. I have a special package for Mrs. Melissa Wooliver." The guard frowned. "Such packages go to the receiving center." "No, the courts require a photo ID and personal signature. It's best done quietly, or I'll have to track her down, causing more trouble." "Wait," the guard said. "What do you want?" "I meet her in the lobby, Idaho her, get her signature, and leave. No hassle." He nodded. "Go upstairs, but you need a visitor's pass. I'll hold your ID while you have it." Got it, I agreed, handing him my driver's license. He reluctantly took it and gave me the pass. Return the badge to get your license back. Got it. I nodded and headed to the third floor. At the front desk, I had the same conversation. The receptionist summoned Mrs. Wooliver. I threw away the gum and put my cap in the bag, shedding my disguise. Melissa Wooliver, in her late 20s or 30s, with tanned skin, dark brown hair, and dreamy brown eyes, had a concerned look as the receptionist pointed her out. She hesitated before approaching me. "Joan said you had something for me to sign?" she asked hesitantly. "No, Mrs. Wooliver. I'm Trent J. Rowe. You don't need to sign anything, but I need to give this to you because it concerns you." "What? What is it?" "Mrs. Wooliver, I'm sorry to tell you, but your husband was having an affair with my wife," I whispered, handing her a photo of them in bed. "The envelope contains documents proving everything." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "It has to be a forgery. Noah promised me." "It's not a forgery. I hired a detective agency to investigate my wife. They confirmed she was having an affair. The documents in the envelope prove it legally and unedited. I'm taking this to court." "But he promised," she whispered, crying. She leaned toward me and I comforted her. "He said the first time was a mistake and wouldn't happen again." "Why?" "I don't know, Mrs. Wooliver. This time it was planned and happened multiple times. The envelope contains details of 3 meetings in 5 days. She clutched my shirt, shaking her head. At 5'5", she was much shorter than me. She wiped her tears and looked at me. "I'm about to check out for lunch. I'll send him a picture of me if you want." "Mrs. Wooliver, you are a beautiful woman, but revenge isn't the answer. You have to live with yourself. Don't do something you'll regret or that the legal system won't agree with." She stepped back. "You're right. I gave him another chance, but this is the end. We'll go to court." I included the contact information for a private investigator and an attorney who has been responsive with my case. He filed the papers this morning. Shocked, she took the envelope and thanked me, then asked, "Can I call you if I need advice?" "My number's in the envelope." After visiting the lab Donna Hightower recommended, I sweated for the next few days while managing a project in South Georgia. The thought of contracting something horrible made me even angrier at Reagan. Fortunately, the lab informed me that I had no STDs at the end of the week. I breathed a sigh of relief. At least that danger was avoided. Reagan kept trying to reach me, leaving messages on my work voicemail and cell phone from different numbers. I deleted them as soon as I heard her voice, but she didn't take the hint. Returning to the office Friday morning, I found more messages and deleted them one by one. Then I used my phone's manual to block her number. That problem solved, I decided to visit my parents over the weekend. They were also getting messages from Reagan, so I blocked her number there too. My mom was especially upset, knowing Reagan and I had planned to have kids. She asked me to reconsider the divorce, saying Reagan's actions couldn't be that bad. I shook my head and showed her a cropped photo with the date. Tears ran down her face, but she nodded, finally understanding. She hugged my dad tightly as I waved goodbye and headed to my temporary quarters. The next day at work, Andy Smith rushed into my office with bad news. "Trent, Mary Jo Pilecki's water broke weeks before her maternity leave. What do we do?" We probably should have prayed for MJ and the babies, sent a gift, and had Andy prepare to fill in for her. He wasn't happy, needing to finish his current project early, but Mr. Strickland thought he was the best candidate. Andy looked panicked, with his project still a month from completion. After reviewing schedules, Andy and I proposed an alternative to Mr. Strickland. To avoid disrupting Andy's project, I would take the New Orleans job in his place, handling major issues on other projects as needed, including Baton Rouge. Later that day, we heard Mary Jo and her twins were doing well. I headed to New Orleans, feeling further from Reagan and my past with each mile. By the time I reached the hotel, it was late, and I slept for a few hours before heading to the job site. I spent the morning meeting subcontractors and reviewing plans. Everything was as expected, so I left early to visit Mary Jo in the hospital. She had already received the flowers I sent, so I gave her a thank you gift and a certificate for her children in the neonatal intensive care unit. Although I couldn't see them in person, I watched them on the monitor as MJ and Ozzy looked on lovingly. I was happy for them, but the thought of never having my own children hurt. I turned my focus to the project, making it my priority for the next few days. On Friday, I took the construction office staff out for drinks in the French Quarter. On Monday, George Godwin called to check on the divorce. He was having a tough time in Atlanta, with numerous calls from Reagan trying to reach me, becoming more hysterical with each call. "Are you sure you don't want to talk to her?" he asked. I grinned sarcastically, hearing him laugh. I thanked him and went back to work. In the evening at my hotel, I received a text from an unknown number. "Hey, Trent, my lawyer filed the paperwork today and Noah has been served. Can we talk when you get a chance? Thank you, Melissa W." It was late, so I texted back, and a few seconds later my phone rang. "Hey, Trent, thanks for talking to me." "Glad to, Melissa. How are you holding up?" "It's tough, but I'll manage," she replied uncertainly. "How about you?" Avoiding a deep conversation, I said, "Sounds like you, Melissa. What's going on?" After a brief silence, she said, "Trent, I wanted to thank you for revealing what Noah was doing and stopping me from making a rash decision. You could have taken advantage of my vulnerability, but you didn't. I appreciate it. It's not easy, but I'm determined to get through this. Melissa, it wouldn't have been right for either of us. I'm better now, at least a little, being away from her. I'm glad to hear your determination." "Definitely. I still have a long way to go, but it's better than before." "Good." I considered telling her to call me if she needed to talk, but hesitated. Her soon-to-be ex was mainly her problem, though I was collateral damage. I still had plans for him, so I stayed quiet. We wished each other luck and said goodbye. Work in New Orleans was going well, but I also oversaw the Baton Rouge project and advised on others. I felt like I was in a swamp, up to my armpits in alligators. George called a couple of weeks later with news. "Trent, Mrs. Rowe's lawyer wants a consultation. You'll have to meet with her face-to-face in Atlanta for a few sessions." "What do you want me to do?" My blood boiled at their tactics, but George had warned me. "We held back documentation of her infidelity. Should we present it now?" "We'll have to give it to her lawyer, but Judge Johnson might cancel the request. Warn him first." A week later, Reagan's request for counseling was denied, though Judge Johnson suggested she seek help for her carnal dependence. That was one problem solved. For months, while Reagan and her attorney fought George in court, I kept a low profile, hoping she hadn't hired someone to find me. I had George update my will and life insurance to ensure she wouldn't get a dime if anything happened to me. Once Mary Jo and Ozzy's twins were released from the hospital, I visited them for dinner and babysat one evening. The twins cried loudly after their parents left, making me pray for one child at a time if I ever had kids. Melissa Woolliver contacted me several times, seeking support and courage. I was careful not to cross any lines that could be seen as romantic or adulterous. When things improved for Melissa, her messages stopped. As Mary Jo's maternity leave ended, I had a realtor find me a house. Using pre-Reagan funds, I bought a house in Dunwoody a few weeks before MJ returned. After nearly 3 months in extended stay housing, I wanted a comfortable home and to retrieve my belongings from storage. Mary Jo returned to work, but since we had no new project in New Orleans, she planned to be a stay-at-home mom for a while. Ozzy had secured a position at Loyola, so this wasn't surprising. MJ asked me to consider her for future New Orleans projects, and I agreed. Second, my return to Atlanta meant leaving behind my unofficial godchildren, MJ and Ozzy's kids, whom I babysat often. I would miss seeing them grow up, and it reminded me of being childless because of Reagan. Finally, Reagan was dragging out the divorce, but George Godwin assured me that Judge Johnson was fed up too, and the end was near. I moved into my new home, unpacked, and met a few new neighbors, including a nice divorced woman named Noel. I thanked her for the brownies, but declined her dinner invitation, explaining I couldn't date until my divorce was final. Ethan, who didn't understand the Georgia court system, asked, "When are you going to start dating again?" "When the judge finalizes my divorce. I don't want anything affecting the settlement with Reagan." "So, how's that evil cow doing?" he asked. "I don't know, and I'm not interested." "You know you still owe her a big one," I nodded. "I know. She'll get it when the time comes." Judge Johnson had enough of Reagan stalling and scheduled a final hearing in early April. I arrived a few minutes early and saw Reagan approaching. "Trent, it wasn't supposed to be like this." "I know, Reagan, but you couldn't keep your vows. You've been gone so much. You knew how often I'd be gone when you agreed to marry me. I made up for it each time, except for the last trip when you cheated with your boss and others. After I returned too." She looked angrier than ever, with tears streaming down her face. "But I had needs. Several people were watching us. We talked about all this before we married. You promised your wandering days were over. You failed. Get over it and move on. If you can't, find another therapist." She recoiled at my words. As more people watched, I walked away, seeing George approaching. "Trent, please," she called, but George and I went into the courtroom. The judge wanted us both present for the final signing to prevent further delays. Reagan had an angry outburst, But the judge silenced her and delivered his ruling. The gavel fell, ending our 5-year marriage. I thanked George and headed out. Reagan begged and yelled, but I ignored her. George applied for a restraining order the next day, and Judge Johnson granted it. With the restraining order, Reagan had to stay away from me. If she violated it, a brief stay in jail might do her good, but she was smart enough to disappear from my life. The following weekend, I started dating again, setting up a postponed date with Noelle. She was nice, but we had little in common other than a long, dry spell. When I drove her home, she invited me in, and moments later we were in her bedroom. After the second time, we both grinned, and Noelle snuggled up to me. "Trent, we can do this again if you want," she said, confirming she wasn't looking for anything long-term. I thanked her and headed home. Noelle and I remained casual friends, but never met again. I dated another woman the next weekend and another in Birmingham during a business trip. After each date, I felt devastated, realizing I was no closer to finding the right woman. I needed a friend, lover, and lifelong companion to start a family with. Over the next 2 months, I began to doubt I'd ever find lasting happiness. Nevertheless, short-term happiness was frequent and enjoyable. During Independence Day weekend, I visited my parents and watched my sister, her husband, and their 4 children. Mom, knowing me better than I realized, said I'd never give her and Dad grandchildren if I didn't change something. "I know, Mom. I bought a house and I'm fixing it up." "Trent, a house isn't a home yet. A man and a good woman can make it one. You need to find a good woman." "I know, Mom. I'll find her. Just give me time." She teased, "If we give you more time, your father and I will be dead by then and never meet our grandchildren." Her words made me wonder. One evening in late July, I received a text from Melissa Woolaver. "Hi, Trent. It's Melissa Woolaver. Can you talk sometime when you have a minute?" I was surprised to hear from her after all this time. I finished cleaning the paint sprayer and replied, asking her to call when she could. A few minutes later, she called. "Hey, Trent. Thanks for talking to me." "No problem, Melissa. How are you doing? We haven't talked in a while, and I wasn't sure if you wanted to after everything that happened." I laughed. "Unless you were involved in getting my ex-wife and your husband?" "Ex-husband, as of today," she interjected. "Together, I don't hold you responsible for what happened between them or the disaster they created. So I have no reason not to talk to you." "Good, because I swear I had nothing to do with it." "I didn't think you did, so what's up?" "Well, it took longer than expected, but I'm finally free. I even have my maiden name again, Ortiz. I wanted to thank you for your help. You opened my eyes to what he was doing, provided me with evidence for free, and gave me advice on what to do. I went to another lawyer, but you helped me a lot, and I'm very grateful." "You're welcome. Don't think about it anymore, okay? It's hard, Trent. You were my guiding light when I was so low and depressed. I don't know you well, but I like what I've seen so far. So I'm going to take a chance and do something I've never done before. Will you have dinner with me?" We had a nice dinner, but I spent the evening thinking about how sweet and beautiful she was, and what kind of idiot her ex-husband was. Reagan was just as beautiful, but had a dark side that betrayed me. In my eyes, she went from an 11 to a negative number. "You stare," she said with a smirk, "almost as much as I do." I grinned and nodded. "It's fun to focus when you have someone so nice to focus on." She blushed and covered her mouth. "You want to get out of here and maybe come back to my house?" "I think I'd like that," she whispered. "Please, Trent, take me home or somewhere, now. I need it, and I can't wait." A few minutes later, as we turned onto her street, she reached into her purse and pulled out her cell phone. "Pull into the garage," she said. "The door's open." That night, we didn't leave the bed except for water and bathroom breaks. Thankfully, it was Saturday, and I didn't have to work because I felt I could stay with her forever. After our morning date, she fell asleep, and I sighed with relief, heading to the bathroom. The morning light streamed through the open curtain, giving me my first real look at her bedroom. Our clothes were scattered everywhere, making me smile. The double bed, familiar from the night, and her pile of pillows were now on the floor. The TV was on a stand next to the chair, angled for bed viewing. What caught my attention was Melissa's dresser, covered with photos. I glanced at them, and one made me stop and pick it up. "Trent, what are you doing?" Melissa asked from the bed. "Melissa, who's the girl in these pictures?" "That's my daughter, Ansley. She's 3 years old and means the world to me." Surprised, I said, "You never mentioned her." I wanted to protect her from the Noah story. She was a major issue in our divorce, which is why it took so long. I don't want you to meet her until we're sure about us. "Where is she now?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "She's with him this weekend. Why? Is something wrong?" I liked Melissa a lot, but this was a shock. Melissa, I don't know. I really like you. But if there's one person I dislike as much as my ex-wife, it's your ex-husband. I want kids and would want to be involved in your daughter's life if things work out. But if I show up to her events, who else will be there? Noah? She sighed, understanding. He's a lying, cheating idiot, but he loves her. Exactly. Every time I see him, it'll remind me of what he did to my ex in my marriage. I'll resent him, and Ansley will sense the tension. She might end up resenting me, hurting our relationship. As much as it pains me, I think it would ruin everything. She sat up and whispered, "You're saying we have no future." As much as I'd like to be wrong, no, I don't think we do. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I thought it was too perfect. Please, Trent, just go away. She touched her phone a couple of times and added, "The garage door will be open for you." She fell back on the bed, crying, and pulled the sheet over herself. I grabbed my clothes, dressing in the hallway as I left, hating myself almost as much as I hated her ex-husband. It hurt, but deep down, I knew it was the right decision. Later that day, I visited my parents. I gave them a brief version of what happened, but they knew I was hurting more than I admitted. Mom tried to get more out of me, but I told her it would never work. She gave me a comforting hug and told me everything would be okay, but I struggled to believe it. On Sunday, we met my sister and her family for lunch after church. While waiting for a table, she pulled me aside and made me tell her everything. She'd helped me through past failed relationships, so I opened up, though I left out bedroom details, which she probably guessed. "It won't be easy," she said, "but you can do it if you try and realize you really love her. One date doesn't tell you much. More dates might show you if it's worth fighting for." "Thanks, sis, you're right. One date doesn't say it all, but it told me enough to realize it would hurt more if it failed because of the past. Give it a try. You won't know until you do." I nodded and agreed to think about it. We didn't talk about it again, but it stayed on my mind. Ethan, who understood me best, agreed with my thoughts. But after a trip to a factory near LaGrange, I questioned if Ethan's luck with women made his agreement a good thing. The following weekend, Ethan set us up with a couple of women. We had fun, and I didn't dismiss the idea of dating. During the divorce, Reagan wanted to keep our house. I made George resist, forcing her to sell it since she couldn't afford the buyout without giving up other things she wanted. It was petty, but I felt it was justified. George and Reagan's lawyer were on good terms, and George learned Reagan planned to buy a condo. Later, I heard a rumor that Reagan and Noah were getting married. I called George because it could affect my finances. George had argued that Reagan, being a cheater, shouldn't get alimony, but the judge awarded her a small monthly amount for 5 years or until she remarried. "If she's really remarried, I'll check and get the alimony stopped," George said. "Yeah, and it just shows some people never learn," I said, amazed at their continued relationship, which confirmed my decision to end things with Melissa. "No," George laughed. "It's what keeps me in business." It made me reconsider a choice I thought about early in the divorce, but never believed possible. After hearing about their wedding, I contacted Will Kleiner, a friend at Reagan's firm. We'd known each other since college and reconnected when I started dating Reagan. Will and I met for lunch, and I told him what happened. "That's terrible, Trent. I'm really sorry. I heard Woolliver asked to be transferred to another department. It makes sense now. They're avoiding conflict with HR. Do you have an official policy on this sort of thing?" "Sure. If they violate it, they could get in big trouble, and so could the firm." "I hate to ask, but can you get me a copy of that section of your personnel manual?" "Yes, just don't tell anyone where you got it." The following Saturday, I went on a date and met Will and Lori Kleiner at a Braves game. Will handed me the flash drive, and a few days later, I went to George's house to discuss it. "Trent, I'm sorry. Even if you prove Noah was involved with multiple women, state law won't let you sue. Georgia got rid of alienation of affection in '79, so you can't sue a partner for attracting or distracting another, nor can you sue their firms." Damn. I hoped that financially penalizing the firm would lead to consequences for Noah and Reagan. George smiled. "A lot of potential plaintiffs say that. You can only sue in rare cases where the firm knew and did nothing. Even then, winning significant sums is tough." "Damn," I repeated. He laughed. "Don't give up hope. Let's handle the spousal support issue first and then discuss other options." The next week, George filed a motion proving Reagan and Noah had obtained a marriage license, asking that spousal support payments be terminated. Reagan's attorney opposed it, but Judge Johnson agreed with us, ending the payments. When I brought up the second issue, George told me to be patient. 6 months later, George and I met for lunch. Trent, I suggested waiting because newlyweds need time to settle in. Noah will be cautious for a while, but once the luster fades, he'll likely revert to old habits. It took 2 weeks, but Donna Hightower and her investigator found Noah was already involved with a new subordinate. George packaged the information and gave it to a lawyer friend. We don't want this traced back to you, Trent. If it does and Noah loses his job, Reagan could seek reinstatement of spousal support. She won't hear it from me, and I doubt Noah will tell her. George smirked. Sneaky, sneaky. His lawyer friend delivered the package to Noah's firm. Will told me Noah was escorted out by security and likely wouldn't return. Reagan cried, asking why, but no one told her. Take that, idiot, I said. If I keep this up, I risk becoming a bitter old man. But that's a risk I'm willing to take. I sent the package anonymously, and the next evening, I got a call. Trent, Melissa Ortiz yelled. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I had to tell you. Noah called last night claiming he was laid off due to downsizing and would file for a reduction in child support. I called a friend at the firm and learned there were rumors about his layoff. Today, I received an anonymous express package which explains everything and should help keep my spousal support the same when Noah files his petition. Trent, I think I know who to thank, so thank you. I chuckled. If you spoke to the right person, they'd say you're welcome. As for the package, it seems some people never learn. Noah will probably tell the judge a sad story, but when my lawyer presents the package, I hope the judge uses those very words against him. He just got remarried. I wonder if he started cheating right away this time. Melissa, leave it in the past. Just smile and enjoy life. You deserve it. We said goodbye, likely for the last time. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. I had survived the ordeal and returned as much hell as Reagan and Noah had put me through. Reagan was now in a worse financial situation, in an apartment instead of a nice house, with a cheating husband who paid alimony and child support. I had no regrets. Reflecting on what had happened, I realized I no longer called them derogatory names. Having received retribution, I no longer cared about them. That realization made me smile, but it was short-lived. I discovered that despite everything, they still had power over me. I had given up a chance at happiness with Melissa because of my past with Reagan and Noah. Though I dated and slept with many women, I realized I didn't care about any of them. Melissa was still in my mind, as much as Reagan and Noah. Until I could look at them and laugh, I wouldn't be free. In that moment, I knew what I wanted to do. I picked up the phone, found Melissa's number from the day she received the package, and called her. Hi, Melissa, this is Trent J. Rowe. Can we talk? Trent, you helped me again when you didn't have to. I'm listening. Something came to me tonight. If I'm not too late, I'd like to talk to you about it and see if there's any chance of making a difference. There was silence on the line, though I thought I could hear her breathing. So I continued. Even though I told you to let go of the past, I realized I was still stuck in it myself. I want to apologize for that and ask for a chance to make things right. She didn't interrupt, and I could practically hear Melissa nodding. To my relief, she wasn't seeing anyone else. And to my surprise, she agreed to give us another chance. We went on another first date the following weekend, intending not to rush things. But sometimes things have their own pace. She invited me in, and we shared wine on the couch, talking until 11. A few minutes later, I was carrying her upstairs. We lay together in silence, hoping it would work out. Over the next months, we encountered some difficulties, but we found we agreed on the important things, and the little things didn't matter as much. After our second date, I liked her more and more, eventually admitting to myself that it was more than like. Melissa felt the same, and we started planning a future together. We got married a little over a year after deciding to try again. Ansley was our flower girl, and Melissa and I said, I do, and meant it. We've run into Noah a few times since then, but it didn't go as I initially feared. The first time, he made a snide remark about taking seconds, but I cut him off in a whisper only he could hear. Noah, thanks for taking Reagan, the cheating strumpet, off my hands. If you think she'll be loyal to you, you're even stupider than I thought. And thank you for making it possible for me to be with Melissa, the real woman you couldn't keep. I got the best part of the deal. He nearly choked and clenched his fists, but realized I could have torn him apart. He turned to his young daughter, whispered something, kissed her, and said goodnight to Melissa. Months later, he told her he was divorcing Reagan and realized what I had said was true. When he started to suggest something, she cut him off. Too bad you didn't realize it sooner, Noah. Don't ever mention it again. Since then, Noah hasn't said a word to me. but I see regret in his eyes when he sees us together, and I always smile. Ansley is 6 now, staying at Grandma and Grandpa Ortiz's house. I'm holding Melissa's hand while she squeezes mine. When the doctor gives the order, Melissa makes one last push. Finally, she leans back, and I kiss her forehead as the doctor and nurse work. The midwife looks at us and says, "Mr. and Mrs. J. Rowe, congratulations. You have a beautiful baby boy." In that moment, I realized all the trials and tribulations were worth it. I wouldn't change a thing.